Okay, survival mode. Last week I brought up the topic of caffeine, your endocrine system, the difference between a healthy habit and a healthy addiction. Not necessarily giving a set in stone answer, but hopefully giving some insight to be able to ask yourself questions and define that line on your own. A question was brought up to one of my clients last week about the 4 o'clock crash, and she described it a little bit differently. She described it as not necessarily a need for caffeine, but like a need for something, whether it was caffeine or maybe her favorite coffee drink from the local cafe or whatever it was. Maybe it was carbs. She said, I feel like when this urge comes into me, I can hardly control it. And I think that's perfectly normal. What I would think a lot of us would call that being in survival mode. And in survival mode, that is when we, our stress level is very high. We call it like fight or flight. We're at like a 9 or a 10 stress level. And when this happens, our rational decision making kind of goes away. And we get into this almost instinctual desire that we have to survive this next hour. We have to survive this next day. And so the long-term, our long-term health is no longer the priority. It's our short-term success in whatever situation we are in. So that could be a bunch of different situations, whether it's like a meeting or a presentation that you have to give. If it's a social situation where you're going out with a new group of friends and you're in a different environment that you aren't normally in, and you're not really sure what to do in the situation, so maybe it's like time for a drink or something like that. Or maybe it's when you decided to shift your diet and lifestyle, but you find yourself without the energy that you're accustomed to. Just something doesn't feel right, and so we revert back to these almost instinctual patterns. And at this level, it's very, very, very subtle, and it can kind of creep up on you. I was watching a video by Graham Hancock last night, and he was talking about his marijuana addiction. He said that he was addicted to marijuana for 16 years, but to paraphrase him, he said that he had discovered that it no longer served him. Now, I think that's interesting because that implies that it had served him. And when we say marijuana, we can talk about all substances that we take that alter our consciousness. We can talk about caffeine, alcohol, cocaine, any of these things, sugar, whether it's accepted by society or not accepted by society is kind of irrelevant. These are things that we can be addicted to, but they're also things that can be beneficial, in my opinion. It's really about the drawing that line between, is it a healthy habit, or is this maybe even medicinal at some level, or has it become something that you've become dependent on, so that when you're in that stress level and we have these different triggers, do you get triggered when in the stress level to go towards these substances? And these substances can come in combinations. It can be like salt, sugar, caffeine. It can be, like an upper and a downer at the same time. But what really happens is that we become not addicted to just the substance, but the situation that it applies to. And this can be when you have a bunch of work to do and all of a sudden you get hungry, or all of a sudden you need to go get a Diet Coke, or you need to go to Starbucks, and the craving wasn't there before, but then this situation occurred, and this situation may happen every week or every month. And I think there was some program I did last year where I was like, it was at the MS Center, and I was like, well, what's your least favorite thing to do during the week? And I think that these triggers that we have can associate with those least favorite things, and they can be social. A lot of us don't like to go out for social functions, and so we cope with that by consuming, way too much alcohol when we go out. But on the flip side, I think that in a conscious way, when we're not in this really high stress level, when we're able to take a deep breath and say, okay, what do I actually need right now? I think that certain substances can be healthy, even foods. And I think it's good to draw the line not only between habit and addiction, but in a decision-making process. Is this going to be nourishing, or is this going to be detrimental to me? And nourishing can come as, how we think of it as like nutrients, or it can come on come as more of an energetic level, like a hug, something like that. Hug doesn't give you any nutrients, however, it's very nourishing to you. And I think that this is how caffeine can work. This is how, if caffeine, then all substances, all being kind of a gray term. I think that another thing we can discuss is the idea of your thresholds, and this has to do with food and substances. I used to talk about this a lot too. We talk about this cliche in the kind of modern health world, modern health and nutrition world, about like your everything in moderation, including or except moderation. I don't know, I get confused about it, but it's so cliche that I don't really like to use it, because, well, what is that level of moderation? If I eat chocolate chips and I'm like, okay, well, everything in moderation, blah, 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 then it's almost like a crutch. It's just like when somebody's shooting up heroin and they come up with that rational thought, like right before, like, yeah, like this is, for some reason, this is the right thing to do right now. And I think that we need to understand levels of thresholds, especially when we're talking about food, but even more especially when we're talking about substances, because obviously, a very highly trained psychotherapist can utilize, things like LSD in a small dose in a very controlled environment and do it intelligibly, whereas using it as a recreational drug is probably not the best thing. But even as food, you can say that a good dessert, made with your spouse or your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever it is, and like you guys go and you go shop for all the ingredients together, and then you make it together, and then you have a delicious dinner followed by the dessert and then some really good sex. I mean, what is unhealthy about that, even though there might be some sugar and some gluten involved? And when we think about these thresholds, I think it's also good to understand that you can increase your threshold for certain things, and we could talk about this 4 o'clock crash thing. Like, maybe you go and get your cup of coffee, but you also have some, like a little cup of brown rice and an avocado, because and maybe even like a hard-boiled egg or something like that you brought, because maybe the vitamin B1 and the sulfurs in the egg, and the vitamin B6 and the protein and omega-9 in the avocado, and then the fiber that's in the avocado and the brown rice, and then the protein from the egg, if I haven't said that already. All of those things can kind of help counterbalance the effects of coffee, and also to sustain them, so that you don't get like that crazy jittery feeling at 4 o'clock and then you're still able to sleep at night. So certain things can counterbalance to increase the threshold of other substances. And this is very fascinating when we're talking about these situations, these substances, these foods, because it becomes such a wide spectrum, such a holistic experience, that you can't listen to anyone say, hey, this is the time that you can have coffee, and you can only have black coffee, you can only have this, you can only have that, because what the hell do they know about your situation of that day? The point that I want to drive home to you is to be able to say, when you're craving these things, or when you're in a situation of that fight or flight, or when you're in a situation where you normally, crave these things, and you're wondering, like, is this a good decision for me, or how can I prepare for this situation, because it keeps happening every week, is to say, okay, am I in a rational thinking process? Am I really hungry? Am I really lethargic? Do I just need, like, maybe a half cup of coffee? Maybe I had one earlier, maybe I just do a half one now, and then that'll give me, like, the adrenal boost to get me going. Maybe I don't have time to go for, a little, like, jog or a walk around the building. Maybe I do. Maybe I have time to go to a yoga class, or maybe I have time to just do a 5-minute yoga practice on my own. Maybe that will have the effect. When you're in a rational thinking state, you can make these decisions on your own. Maybe you've had a really, really long week with a lot of stress, and maybe going out for a couple drinks with some friends is exactly what you need. But are you doing it because you're consciously saying, hey, this is nurturing for my body, this is nurturing for my life? Or is it something that you're doing subconsciously or even unconsciously, it's just kind of happening, and then the entire situation happens, the situation with food, the situation with the substance, it occurs, and then afterwards you're left feeling guilty. And the more you can make these decisions and afterwards say, hey, you know what, I did this to nourish myself, to nourish my body, nourish my life, and say that you did that consciously with awareness, the more that can happen versus a situation happening and you're like, whoa, what the fuck did I just do? I think that you're going to find that your entire spectrum of health, including your endocrine system, including your disease preventative mechanisms of your body, including the health of your organs, including your digestive health, your regularity, including your sex life, including the decreasing dependency of the things that you are naturally inclined towards. Myself inclined towards sugars, caffeine, not necessarily alcohol, not really pot anymore, but definitely food. I'm very addicted to food, and certain foods at certain times. So, and it can be something that takes me away from the present moment when I really don't need these things. But the more consciously we can make our decisions with that awareness, I think is going to be good for yourself, but then also good for the people around you. And the more you the more you know me, the more you know that, we're not just making these decisions for ourselves and our own bodies. We're making them so that we can have more of a beneficial impact to the world around us. So thank you so much for your time and consideration. If I offended you, please leave a comment and ask me questions. If you'd like to submit any other questions or any other feedback, you can leave something on my YouTube or my web page. I also have a retreat coming up in the Osa Peninsula of Costa Rica, April 12th through the 19th. If you'd like to find out more information, you can check out my Facebook or my webpage at www.jamesmorse.co. Other than that, I hope you guys have a really good day, make some, aware decisions, have a good time. Bye.